My name is June Russell, and I met my husband through writing letters back and forth from Beirut to the United States. Well, I was born in Riverton, Nebraska, but my family moved from there when I was 3 years old, and I grew up mostly in Pennsylvania. And I wanted to go to college, but I didn't have any money, so I had to stay out of school for a couple of years. And by the time I was able to go out to college, I think I had earned about $50. You don't earn very much. Years and years ago when I was small. I went down and to what was called Washington Missionary College in a suburb of, in Tacoma Park, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. I worked all my way through. My folks were not able to help me at all. After the first 2 years, my father had retired from teaching, and he had gotten a job down in the mill of the school. At that time, there was a mill, and I'm not sure what kind of work he did there, but he wanted me to join him in an apartment. And so I lived at home and didn't have to work so hard. And but in order to get through school, I had to attend 6 years to get all my full credits. After school, I taught down Shenandoah Valley Academy, which is down in Virginia. I taught there 2 years, and then I was given a call to Mount Vernon, Ohio. Can't think of the name of the school there, but I taught there 3 years, and then was given a call to go overseas to Beirut, Lebanon. Our school there is on the side of a mountain, about 15-minute drive from Beirut, and it's a beautiful view. The first couple of years I lived in the president had gone home on furlough, and I lived in his home. And then they built a store on the college campus and 2 apartments above it. And I was given one of those apartments. And my apartment had a front porch that had 6 doors. They were hinged doors that folded back and made a really, just my living room kind of floated out onto a small porch. And that was, I could at night look down on the Mediterranean and see the fishing boats. You could tell them because they were small boats with a light at the front and at the back of the boat. After the 3rd year, that summer, I was planning to go on a trip before school started up into Turkey, where we knew a few people, and I was going with the friends of mine who had come to the school, whose name was Jim and Carolyn Russell. And we made it. Before we went, though, about a week before we went, Mrs. Russell came to me and wanted me to start writing to her husband's brother. And my first thought was, well, they were friends of mine. I hate to say no, but I'm not a good writer, and so I thought, well, it'll just fizzle out, because I always spent a lot of time with the students. I told her, I said, well, if he wants to write the first letter, I would answer it, thinking, you know, that it won't last long. Anyway, it was a very interesting correspondence. First of all, he sent just a friendship card with a few sentences, and I found a friendship card to send back, and, you know, again, just a couple of lines or so, and another friendship card back and forth. And after that, he would sit down and write something every night. I didn't get a letter every day, but he would write something, and he said, well, I'll have to finish it tomorrow, you know, it's getting late. And I would get, 2 or 3 letters a week. As we were writing, you know, you try to think of, when you don't know someone very well, you kind of ask questions and tell them things you think might be interesting. And it seemed as though we were kind of thinking along the same lines, because I would write a question, and before he got the letter, the letters were crossing, he was telling me about the things I had asked about. And it just happened quite often. So that I would call Jim and Carol, and I said, oh, I've got to read you something. Anyway, we kept writing, and it seemed like that, and it was getting towards Christmas time. And in Beirut, we were planning a trip with some of the students to go to a school in Baghdad. We had a school there at that time, about 80 students, and they were mostly non-Adventists, but we had some Adventists there too. And we were going, Christmas that year was on Sunday, and we were going to leave early Sunday morning. And on Friday, I got a letter, a proposal of marriage. And I was stunned. I thought, well, you know, I wasn't expecting, you know, without having even seen him, that he would write me a letter of proposal. And I was so busy that I didn't answer it until on the way to Baghdad. My first thought, you know, what shall I tell him? Anyway, I wrote a letter back of acceptance. And after we came back from Baghdad, and one day Carolyn called me, she said, I need to get a watch for our son. He's wanting a new watch. And she said, I know you're wanting to get one. I thought I'd get one for one of the men in the division office was down the hill, and they, coming back and forth overseas, they would quite often go through the what they call a free port, and were able to get things less. And she said, I know maybe you could find what you want downtown. And I said, well, I wasn't meaning to buy one. She said, well, you could find what you want just so you could tell them what they want to buy. So we went down, and she seemed so interested in me getting that watch. So we found one I liked, but I said, well, let's look a little more. And we went to another store and found the same watch. And she said, you know, she said, maybe that's the only one in Beirut. She said, I think you should get it. And I said, well, I didn't bring any money to buy with. Oh, she said, well, I have enough money for it. So we bought it. So one day, shortly after that, they called me down to their office. And when they got there, they presented me with a letter from Bill and saying that the watch was an engagement present. So he had sent them an engagement present over. I had announced to the whole school, only Carol and Jim, and the president of the college at that time was Dr. Vine, and he and I and his wife were friends of mine, of course, and we decided to make an announcement, and the boys' dormitory, the boys of the dormitory were having the next Saturday night program, and I said to Carolyn, I said, see if you can have the very last spot on the program, and we'll announce my engagement at that time. And Carol and Jim got up on the stage, and Jim was reading out of the newspaper, and he was making up jokes about different things about the campus. He was, as if they were some news. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he said, June Russell is going to get married this next summer to Bill Russell. And the room went quiet. They thought maybe it was another joke. And Carolyn jumps up and she said, it's really true. June is going to be my sister-in-law. We decided, actually, I guess it was Carolyn, more or less. There was a couple that wanted my apartment, and they were waiting. They were going to be working on the college campus, but they didn't have any place to live. They were waiting for me to leave so that they could have my apartment. They were waiting, and so Carolyn said, all our children are gone, but our youngest, and we have an extra bedroom. She says, why don't you come up here for the last 3 months, and we'll save that money, and we'll buy Bill a ticket so you can get married over here. And well, she said, all your friends are here now. I said, if you go back to Washington, D.C., all your friends would be gone there, and so she wrote to Bill with that manner, and he thought it was a good plan. But we had a problem. It was the year 1967, and I was evacuated to the island of Cyprus. The night that I arrived there, we got a hotel in the capital of the city of Cyprus, and I tried to send a telegram to tell Bill where I was. But there were so many people that were ahead of me that they said I couldn't get a telegram out probably for a couple of days, and he was to be leaving Angwin the next day. And so there was no way I could tell Bill where I was. You see, Bill was supposed to arrive in, he was going to stop in Cologne, our school. There, it's on the border of France and Geneva. He was to arrive there on a Friday. So I went up on Friday morning and arrived just a little before the time he was to arrive, but he didn't arrive. On his way to the airport from Angwin, they had so much traffic that they were late. On the way from the airport to New York City, where he was to take a plane for Brussels, that was his first stop, there was a storm, and they had to go quite a ways south, and by the time they got to New York City, he'd missed his flight to Brussels. So he had to spend the night there and come on, and that's why he was late. When he came into Brussels a day late, he called the Dean of Girls, and I had gone up, so she got the call in the middle of the afternoon. We had all laid down a little while, to rest, and it said the call was from the Dean of Girls, and she said that Bill had called and he would be arriving in Geneva Airport that night at 10 o'clock. And when Artis first told me, she wasn't going to tell me why they were going out there. But she said, I better tell her she might want to comb her hair and fix it up a little to meet Bill for the first time. So we went down to the airport. We evidently got there a little late because it was almost deserted. We opened the door down to a long hall where we saw a man looking at something on the wall. And later he said he was looking to see how far from me. Well, anyway, to find out how far from town, how to get away home, away to Artis. He started walking towards us, and when he got closer, she said, "That's my uncle." She said, and she turned around and went back. She thought I wanted to meet him alone. So that's where we met, was in the airport in Geneva. Of course, you can imagine, even though it was late at night, we sat and talked for quite a long time before we went to bed that night. Well, we tried to get married in Geneva, and they said we'd have to wait 2 weeks. Well, we didn't want to wait there, unmarried, 2 weeks in 2 different hotels, so we thought we might as well go back to Cyprus and see what they would say there. When you're in the Middle East, you have to be married by the government. So if you want a wedding, you have 2 weddings. And so I went to the government first to see, what the conditions were there, and they said we'd have to wait 21 days, and I think the fee was $75. So I said, well, let's go to the embassy and see if they know a way around this. And so we went to the embassy. They called the ambassador, and he said, well, if you have a minister here in Cyprus, there's no waiting and there's no charge. But he said you have to have a representative from the embassy, and he said we don't often have weddings, from people overseas happen here. He said, I'd be glad to come to your wedding. I said to Bill, why don't we get married tomorrow? I said, why don't we have the wedding here? And that's what we did. Anyway, we got married. The ambassador was there, and of course, we stood around and talked after a while for a few minutes, and then the ambassador said, well, I'm sure you want your new name on your passport. And so he said, why don't you get in my limousine and I'll take you back to the embassy and we'll get that all fixed up. I was married June 16 in 1967 to Bill Russell. I was married for 33 years, and it was a wonderful marriage. I couldn't have asked for a better husband if I'd been looking the world over. And I miss him.